Hi there class, this is a quick video for you about business memos, and it's specifically designed to help support you as you work through the assignment called the Dress Code Memo in Business 310. I'll start by just showing this screen as a sample so that you can see memo formatting. I think this sample memo should be uploaded to Canvas. It's really just there so that you can get a sense of the formatting for a memo, and I'll talk through what some of the key points are here. First of all, it's probably helpful to know that memos are usually written for an internal audience within a business or organization. That just means that they're going to be written for people who are part of your organization and not necessarily written for a public or general audience. What I think is really nice about memos is that the formatting is simple and they can be an effective way to communicate essential information concisely and in a way that's easy for readers to access. We might not see them as commonly as we used to prior to email and the digital revolution, but these are still very important documents in most business settings. A couple of things here about format. All memos are going to be distinguished by this header here. You might notice that it looks a lot like an email header with the to, the from, the date, and the subject. And that's because email has adopted that format from the memo. Basically what these are, if you're sending it to a specific audience, that's going to show up on the first line. Whoever is sending it will be listed on the second line. And there might be occasions where the person who writes the memo is different. In the case of like an executive assistant for a CEO, for example, you might include that there. A really formal memo will have the author's initials handwritten next to their name. If you want to add that little touch, it's great. I haven't done it here. The other pieces that are critical, the date is necessary so that we know when it was written and we can refer back to it, especially if we need to establish a timeline of events. Or in this case, if you're writing a policy memo and in the future have an employee who maybe isn't following it, you can use the memo to say, if you look back on this date, we had the policy written out for you here. The subject should be descriptive and typically pretty short, so just a few words. You'll notice that the body of the memo here is organized as short paragraphs. I really encourage you to use paragraph breaks in your business writing. In other writing classes, or if you've written other types of genres like journals or essays, you might have longer paragraphs, but short paragraphs are actually easier to read and can really help with organization. So in this case, the first one sets up a little bit of reason, the exigence for why needing to be aware of technology requirements and security is essential for this class. The second paragraph explains really kind of what technology you need and where you can get it if you don't already have it. You'll notice that there are some web links here. That's fine if you're planning on submitting the memorandum digitally, but if this is going to be a piece of paper, a web link might not turn out to be that helpful. And then there's specific details listed here, so instructions for the reader. Change your passwords, for example. Don't put your password right next to your computer, things like that. And then the very short last one includes instructions for how people can follow up if they have questions. One quick note about what this does not have that you would generally see in a letter. Business letters have a salutation line. Dear employees, dear class. We don't have that. And similarly, we don't have that line at the bottom that says, sincerely, Ryan Murphy, or sincerely, general manager. The nice thing, because this is an internal document, we can leave those salutations out. So a couple of other notes. In most cases, you'll use single spacing for a business memo unless there's a really good reason to do something different. The standard is single spacing. Be really specific whenever you're writing out a policy. Try to avoid ambiguity if you can. If you have a specific call for action, follow it up with a specific timeline or time frame. So when will things need to be done, or when does the policy become effective? And then similarly, there needs to be some statement about follow-up. Who will be responsible for enforcing the policy? Who is responsible for taking certain actions? This is really kind of a distinguishing characteristic of a managerial memo. A couple of general kinds of considerations for memos to think about. First of all, this question, memos usually come around for a reason. The person writing it has some backstory or there's something going on in the workplace. In the example of our assignment, it's employees who can't be identified because there's no dress code, and so we would call that the exigence. It's important sometimes to state that because it gives you as the writer of the memo the chance to set things up in a way so that it makes sense the way you see it, bearing in mind that other people might see things differently. For the audience, this is probably something you're already hopefully stating in that to line at the top of the memo, but you might need to go into a little more detail in the memo itself and explain who needs to be reading the memo, who is going to be responsible for reading the memo, who's responsible for taking actions. More importantly, perhaps also there's a reason for why readers would need to or want to read the memo. The appeal here sometimes shows up near the top, sometimes it's buried a little bit further on, but it's going to kind of offer some rationale or reasons for why the reader needs to read it and not just treat the memo like a piece of junk mail or another poster or billboard. If the memo is communicating some instructions or a new policy or a change in policy, it's important to give a clear list of instructions as far as what needs to take place. In the case of this dress code policy, you might specify the clothing that people need to wear, or you might outline the types of clothing that are not acceptable and employees cannot wear at work. Either way, be specific. If it helps, you can use a numbered list or a bulleted list to do that. And finally, you might think about some ways in the written memo to also help develop cooperation with the new policy. As a manager, you can take different routes. If you prefer to take the incentive route and be a little more friendly with your employees, you can offer them positive incentives, so things like maybe an extra holiday or a gift card for a free lunch or whatever it might be. If you're the type of manager that prefers to be a little bit more authoritarian, this would be the place where you would maybe outline what the consequences are for not following the policy and what kinds of punishments might follow. Whatever the case, you can pick your approach, but just maybe work to develop a sense of motivating cooperation amongst the employees. And as I close, I'll say, if you look on Canvas, I will include a link to some samples of the ways that other Business 310 students have completed this assignments. They will include my comments as if they were final drafts, so you can get a sense of what I'll be looking for. As always, let me know if you have any questions. I hope that this sample video about memos is helpful as you work to complete this assignment. Thanks.